Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight or today's webinar, wherever it is or whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the presentation. I am the gentleman on your screen left, Jordan Thistlewood, Director of Product for Look Development, Lighting, and Pre-Production. And I am joined by Gary Jones.
Hi, I'm Gary Jones. I'm the Katana Associate Product Manager.
Okay, we will try and make it as informative and entertaining as possible. Okay, so for today, first we wanted to kind of share why are we developing Katana, what motivates us. So in the end of it, we're making it for you guys. Artists that sit at the chairs in front of the monitors, making the artwork for the television shows and the movies and the trailers and everything else that we get to watch. We know how tough it can be. We can know how rewarding it can be. So we would like to build you and continue to build you the best tool for that look development and lighting workflows. Okay, we'll take you through our vision of where things can go. And then what we'd like to do is then show you how Katana 3.6 fits into that vision. And then we'd like to share with you some of the things that are coming up. So if you've seen some of our presentations in the past, you would have heard this. It's a very complicated process to be in look development lighting. Look development, you are trying to create something that looks to the art direction. You're trying to make it fit. You're trying to adhere to the responsibilities of putting something into the pipeline that is going to be one of many things that go through the pipeline. When you're on the receiving end in the lighting department, you are collecting everything from everybody else upstream. You are the recipient of either the good or bad choices, the compromises, the expectations, the scope, the compressed schedule, everything comes to a sort of a pinch point in the lighting pipeline. So Katana is a tool that is designed to work with and deal with that scope, that complexity, that volume of work. And so to that end, it is built to present you every bit of information you ever want to know about your scene, and sometimes a lot more than you probably need to know. To that end, while not pulling away from this view of the world where we can present to you everything, we want to make sure that artists have in front of them, when they have the creative tasks in mind, they have the workflow that they need. So here was one of the original mock-ups that we shared starting a couple of years ago with the idea of a mixed ray tracing and GL viewport. So when we moved to the Hydra viewport with Katana 3.0, it was a really liberating experience for us. We had been on this journey of rebuilding lots of parts of Katana to sort of enhance it to work with today's scale. So when you look at the difference between this, where you've got a lot of information available to you, to this, which is really focused on the artist's workflow and just having the right things in front of you at the right time to make choices, being an artist, being able to opt in to, based on the processing power of the computers that you have at your disposal, what is ray trace, what is GL, this is sort of the area we were going. So we started to refine this a bit more, and we've been looking through Foundry as a group at all our workflows, Nuke and Modo and Mari and Katana, all trying to make things more approachable, easier, refined. So when you start looking at things like this, you start to see in this design, we've included the idea of adding in things like the Modo channel hall system, floating palettes that are like the ones that we already have, but more refined. So more compact, but still the state badges that tell you what's being altered, what the basic information that you need, and also just making this something floatable. So Gary, maybe you want to tell them about this bit of work that's in Katana 3.5.
Yeah, so we started along the journey to try and reach that goal with 3.5, and here what you're actually seeing is a mixture of a GL and a ray traced render, with the ray trace render actually sitting on top of the GL. So it enables you to interact with all of the elements that are in that GL, but also have the immediate feedback of what your final render is actually going to look like. It gives you the advantage of all of the beauty of Katana's process separation. So if anything happens to the render, it doesn't crash your Katana. You don't have any, you don't lose any work that you were doing. So that kind of separation, but also gives you the benefit of being able to interact directly with that image straight away when you're actually making lighting changes or look development changes.
And I think you touched on, a couple of key points there. It's exactly like your final image. There's no approximation. It's not a different set of shaders. It is the image that you are going to produce. So that's really key there. We built on top of this. So one of the beautiful things is once you start getting these workflows in your hands, you start building on those ideas. You start realizing, wow, if I did this, if I did that. And that's really so this is, a very exciting time with Katana. So we started to look at this. Okay, well, we've got this workflow now. You don't necessarily need the 2D image viewer monitor for interacting with your renders if you have it this way. So why don't we mash those two together? So what you're seeing here is one of our design prototypes where we're starting to look at reimagining how a 2D and 3D set of controls would appear in one viewport. So you could have your options for both. Here we've got one of our design prototypes that shows what would it be like if you could actually manage your AOVs for either a preview or a live render in a more fluid way. A lot of these ideas of how the UI is coming about extend to what is the future of hardware? Are we all going to be working through a big tablet? With all that's been going on in the world, a lot of people have been working on remote workstations. So there's a lot of things that are floating through our heads around how does an artist potentially interact with a computer in the future. So that's the vision. Everything in front of you, you're working on top of the image. When you're an artist needing to do creative work, that's what you have in front of you to deal with. And again, all this built to deal with the absolute most complex. For our timeline, we're approaching, and we're currently in the beta phase of Katana 3.6. So that is just around the corner. So if everything continues then along that path, then we're looking for a summer release of Katana 3.7, which is going to have the next wave of work on the sort of path to this vision that we've shared with you. And then a third release, hopefully in around the November timeframe, for a split between Katana 3.8 and 4.0. So what we're looking at here is 3.8 would be the Python 2.7 version of a sort of features and development, and 4.0 would be the Python 3 version of that, with the rest of the visual effects reference platform 2020 as well. So we're going to keep you guys posted. We're still working full steam ahead. We're going to do our best to hold to this schedule. Okay, so there's a lot of things in Katana 3.6, but the things that we wanted to talk about today, the new dockable widgets, snapping, which is work that Gary personally led, some improvements to the network material workflows that are inside Katana, and we'll also kind of give a bit of a history overview of the scope of materials inside of Katana, because I don't know that everyone always needs it or knows it. And then we'll get into the sneak peeks. Okay, so dockable widgets. This is a stepping stone towards these floating panels that can be filterable and things like that. So in Katana 3.6, you can create a dock area at the top. And these docks are persistent. You can have one at the bottom. So in this case here, we've got a render log that's running and always visible. So no matter what happens, if I make a particular part of the UI go full screen, I will always have that render log available to me. So that's always handy. So you can make one on the left. So if you wanted to have your scene graph per se always available, you can dock it there to the left. And then one of my personal favorites, throwing things like the parameters tab always on the right hand side. So what does this actually look like in practice? So you can right click on the tab, you say move to a dock of your choice. You can refine your UI layout a bit, and then you can take whatever part of the UI you want full screen. So now you can see I have my scene with our monitor layer active. I'm now able to go in and start modifying light. So here I've soloed this one spotlight underneath the counter. I can make an adjustment to it and change the light color a bit. And the same with this other light. I can copy and paste that light color across. Check it all out. So you can see the docs are going to give you a new workflow opportunity. All right, so snapping. This is something that we were really enthusiastic to get in. Gary lent us his production experience on the shows like Lion King and Jungle Book and all the others that he worked on to sort of lead the group that did this work. So why don't we start off with this part then, Gary?
Yeah, so we kind of went back and worked out how we want to use it in kind of lighting and look development, what sort of things you end up snapping to, what's actually important to it. So we've ended up with 10 different modes inside Katana for the snapping. And instead of digging into lots of different parameters, making it really easy for you to be able to see and select which one you actually want. And all of these are toggleable with a hotkey, and how you actually interact with it is a little bit different to potentially some of the other areas inside Katana. So you can shift between the different modes by using Shift V. You can temporarily engage the mode by pressing and holding V, or you can toggle the mode on and off by just hitting V. So it gives you all of those different options with the single keyboard shortcut.
Very cool. And then we did some sort of special work around the feedback and how it interacts with models.
Yeah, so what we noticed is Katana has, when you're actually moving and using manipulators inside Katana, your cursor disappears because your manipulator actually ends up being your clue to where your mouse actually is. Of course, that doesn't help when you're moving around and trying to snap to things. So we wanted to give you a visual clue as to what you're actually snapping to. And because you have a couple of different options on the way that snapping can work, one of the ways, which is how it works inside Maya, is it can literally be anything that's on screen. You know, it checks everything and then snaps to whatever what it thinks is the nearest and most likely thing. Or you can go with a mode whereby you have what's called like a hit area. And anything when it's inside that area gets considered for snapping. And that's a really good kind of match for how things work inside of Hydra, and that's the one that we went with. And we gave you the ability to change how large that hit area is and a visual clue for what that hit area actually looks like. So it's really, really easy for you to see what is being considered when you're actually moving things and trying to snap to things inside Katana. And here we have an example of it being snapped to our robot that ships as standard. You can see that not only are we giving you a visual clue of what we're snapping to, we give you that wireframe, which is another really kind of standard thing that you always seem to do when you're trying to do snapping, is you turn on wireframe on shaded, or you go into wireframe mode. Well, we do that automatically for you. We also show here with when you're orienting to normal, exactly what you're orienting along, what the normal is that's being considered, and the different types of mode have different types of visual clues. Like you saw the outline of the object when you're in surface snapping mode. The orient along a normal goes away when you're just snapping to, say, the face or the vertex. And all of those give you an idea not only of what you're snapping to, but what sort of mode you're in.
All right, and then we also did some work on heavy geometry.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do at the moment is we cache the objects that you're snapping to make the speed really, really quick when you're actually moving things around and snapping to it. Sometimes if you are trying to snap to a very heavy piece of geometry, you might see a slight lag as you move towards that object being cached. But going forward, that lag should go away in later releases of Katana when we move to a kind of a more a newer caching strategy behind the scenes. But it means that your actual snapping right now will be very, very fast when you're actually using heavy pieces of geometry once you get over that initial caching moment.
And this is one of my favorites when we combine the monitor layer with snapping.
Yeah, so immediate feedback of what the snapping is going to be doing. And here we're showing it with the GL representation, but that could also be, you could be just seeing the immediate render as well. So the option's going to be up to you, really. So it'll make a really nice, fast way of you being able to see the results of your snapping. And of course, it doesn't have to be objects that you're snapping. It could be lights. It could be anything, really.
Okay, so thank you for that, Gary. Why don't we spend a couple minutes going through network materials. Now, the specific work around 3.6 has been around what we call the network material edit, and you'll see what this all adds up to in a minute. But what we'd like to do for those of you that are new to Katana is just give you a bit of a history lesson in all the power that is the Katana material system, because it is deep. Okay, so altogether, the whole process is really about making beautiful surfaces that you can throw lights onto that just really get your job done, that make things look photorealistic or stylized, however it is, but really it's about creating those set of instructions that inform the renderer that how to make those complex surfaces. In Katana, usually it's fits into 2 steps: look development and lighting. Within look development, you work with all the shaders, you get everything done, you get that approved. You then bake out the results of that into an instruction file. We call those the Katana look files, and those go through into your asset management system, and they can be pulled and matched against those assets in the lighting pipeline. This is also a key area that will transition to a USD shade-based workflow through extensions to the look file bake API that we've made and plugin work that we'll be doing in the future. So in Katana, in the old sort of pre-3.2 days, this is the tools that you would use. They worked at the root level of the node graph. They were everywhere, and you had a lot of complex tools. So you had everything from a network material node that was fed shading nodes that could be organized in subnets or groups effectively. You would have tools that would allow you to connect an array of inputs. But then if you wanted to start getting into the more complex things that Katana can do, you would have to use this separate network material interface controls. The thing that I would love to share with you about Katana and the way that it works. So those of you that are familiar with RenderMan and are familiar with the Uber shader workflow, the idea that as a shading artist or shader writer, that you could use a tool like Slim, you could, through the node network, visually program a shader. You would make choices about what the controls were that yourself or another artist might then refine. You would then compile that, publish it, and submit it to the pipeline. Katana can support that. Now, as of 3.6 and starting from 3.2, you now have this reduced set of tool sets, but they have the full functionality of this whole arsenal of tools, but just in a much nicer workflow. So we added the network material create in 3.2. We enhanced it in 3.5. And then in 3.6, we're introducing the network material edit. And this is to replace these tools here, the network material parameter edit and the network material splice. So what are these tools for? When you are in shop production and you have a monolithic material and you only have the promoted controls, what happens at the 11th hour when you've got one last chance to render the shot? You do need to make some kind of change to the network of nodes inside the material, but you don't have access. The answer is you bang your head against the desk. So Katana was built with tools, these network material parameter edit and network material splice, that regardless of this sort of compiled, you would use these tools to dive inside a compiled shader, as it were, or a black boxed shader, to touch the parts that were not yet promoted. This gives you security, this gives you the ability to get in, but because it's done as a separate tool, it's a procedural override, and you don't have to worry about it. If you need to then decide or figure out where that happened, you know, because you can look for these tools. All right, so with that out of the way, so Katana then had 3.1 in earlier before we introduced the network material create. This is a very simple network. Our clients use tens, hundreds, and sometimes thousands of shading nodes, but it gives you the idea. This is what artists would look for or work with. When you were making connections, you would have this little pop-up. So the first driving force in the work that we did was that the material system, in terms of its architecture, was robust and sound. It was a user experience, artist workflow challenge that we were looking to answer. So what did we do? We created a network or a material node graph like this, which has with it the ability to then have proper left to right workflow, has multiple ins and outs, and you can see everything that is taking place all at once. You have the ability to have shading groups, and so you can have inside those shading groups unique sets of materials, and from there you can create your own little subset. Now Gary, maybe you could sort of give them an idea what's happening here.
Yeah, sure. So this is using some of the tools that we introduced in 3.5. Here, what we're actually doing is creating a shading group. We're promoting some of those parameters to the outside of that shading group. And that enables you to create what is essentially a reusable widget or a gizmo if you come from kind of a Nuke background. In this particular case, what we're using it for is to create different variants of the robot that's currently live rendering in the top right hand side, and we're going to make 4 different types of it just by changing the kind of materials that are actually the actual textures that are being plugged in here. And now, in what was essentially just a few minutes, I know it's been a little bit sped up, we've managed to create 4 different variants of that particular robot just by plugging in different textures with those reusable widgets.
Yeah, and I think there's something that's really cool with this, which is these shading groups, with the work that Gary was talking about, can become their own standalone monolithic materials. So you could have a shading group that is your metal material, your plastic material, your wood material. You can then just connect those up to layered materials and masking inside of your look development. You can create a whole library with these. And we'll talk a bit in our sneak peeks about why or how you could do that in a really cool pipeline fashion. So what I'd like to do then is just using the new tools, give some of you that are new to Katana an insight into the nice things that are there, the fundamentals. Okay. So here we've got the node network. Again, simplified, but you've got backdrops, you've got the groups, you have different collapsible states, you can set customizable colors. You have on the right-hand side a little bar here where you can connect to all the various types of terminals, so subsurface and environment and volume and whatever else that your renderer might support. If you have multiple renderers that are loaded, they will each show here. So you can develop a shader for multiple renderers at the same time. We've talked with many clients who one of their challenges is in a multi-renderer studio, keeping the default look development scene up to date. You balance between V-Ray and Arnold or Redshift or RenderMan, and you keep on trying to sort of keep them in sync. Well, in Katana, that's as simple as working in one network like this, plugging in the different tools, and then just toggling which renderer you use and doing A/B wipes between them. All right, so getting back to this idea that we spoke about with the sort of the legacy of Uber shaders, what you can do in Katana is that any node for any parameter has the little wrench icon that we can see here. You click on that, you have access to this edit parameter name and material interface. You can then say, okay, well, in this case, I want to make the file path exposed under a base color group, which then shows that it's being promoted. And then when I look at the top level of the network material create, which is sort of hiding underneath it a lot of complexity, we now have that control. And you can rinse and repeat this for as many of the controls as you want to have access to. And any other tool inside of Katana now will be able to use those controls, but not touch other controls unless you're using the new network material edit. One of the things that makes this really handy is that the material node inside of Katana, which is the little one of the two green ones in the middle, that was in my other image, can make child materials. Now, what is a child material? It is a material that will start from the defaults of the one that you point the tool at. It will only work with the promoted controls, and you can see that in this case we've got a subset here of these. Well, these are actually the full 3-light shader. But what's happening is that the shader ball on the left has the material that is driving all the colors of all the rest. These are all driven by child shaders, which then have changes made that change them into the different surface properties. Now, you could make this something simple as you have a car paint shader that has everything really tweaked out. It looks perfect. You just need to change the color. So you can set all those controls up. We're talking about the network material parameter edit and the network material splice, and how those two tools and all the workflows that they provide are being replaced by the network material edit. Now, in Foundry fashion, the other tools will still be there. All existing shows that have used those tools, those assets should work fine. But moving forward, you'll have access to a new set of tools. Now, the parameter edit would allow you to dive in, choose a node, and change any parameter on it. And we're talking any of them. The network material splice would actually allow you to change the shading network inside of an Uber material or any material at that point that uses the shading nodes. Again, these tools are procedural overrides. So if your look development team then fixes something that you fixed at 11 o'clock at night just before it launched on the render farm and you have to do a retake, you can just either bypass your network material edit and let through the new update, or you can keep it in and just be locked to where you were. So it's quite cool. What was the challenge? Well, the challenge was that this tool showed you the node network looking like this. So just like the old shading network had room for improvement, created new experience for artists, so did the network material parameter edit and network material splice. You can see that there's no association of the color, the grouping, the backdrops. So all the hard work that people put into creating network topology, rules about color coding and placement wouldn't help them in the case of the shop pipeline using the parameter editor or splice. So what we've done is built on all the work that we put into 3.2 and the tweaks we made in 3.5, and we are delivering to you the ability to have a tool that will allow you to just actually work with the shading nodes as they were last touched before they got to you. Here's the really cool thing. When you do a look file bake, or in the future when you do a USD shade export, you are just creating scene graph data. You're not creating an actual Katana document with nodes. So all we have is the information about what node connected to what other nodes with whatever settings are applied to them. But we have built a way to be able to recreate those so that they look like nodes and you have access to them. And so what you will see in 3.6 is that you're going to have access to nodes that are untouched, are going to come through in gray. Nodes that are edited will have this little yellow footer, and new nodes will come in as green. The disconnected and the deleted node states are something that are going to come in the future. What does this actually then look like is something along the lines of this. So when you jump into a network material edit, you're going to know what did you touch, what did you add, or maybe it was somebody else that did the work, but you'll know exactly what happened. And you'll know what's default, so what is just passing through. These are procedural changes that are kept as thin edits on top of the node graph or the document. So it's not wholesale stamping and copying the node network, so it can take procedural updates, which is really, really cool. All right, thanks to Owen Franklin, our senior QA on Katana, for providing these images. Just so you know, we do our own little lighting challenges. We do test out our own tools in a production setting. So he put together this little scene with this robot in the garage. Thank you to Aaron Sims' company for letting us use their robot on our Foundry demos. Now, when you've got this one, and we apply these changes to it, so he's got his maps that he changes around and makes some edits to. He's added in new nodes here, 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 and here. So you can see all the things that he changed. UV repeats were the thing that he didn't change there. You end up with this. So the cool thing is that if we didn't like this and we want to go back to that, you just go to the top level of this node and you just bypass it. And then you're back to the way you want to be. So that's the sort of the nuts and bolts of what's happening with the network material edit. We're really excited to be getting this into artists' hands. It's been a highly requested feature. We feel it's bringing together another half of the work that we want to do on the shading network. So I guess this is the fun part of the evening where we get to move on to sneak peeks. With 3.7, we will be working on a few other enhancements. So one feedback that clients gave us was that the network material crate was initially designed to be a monolithic tool. In other words, one node, one material, but that bypassed the desirable workflow to have multiple network materials share parts of your shading network. So we're enhancing the network material crate node so that it can support creating multiple network materials. What you're seeing happening here now in this prototype is the idea that we will give you control over the various states and what actually gets dimmed out. So it'll be even easier if you just want to find only the nodes that are edited in a very large node graph, that you can dim out everything but the edited nodes or the disconnected nodes or the deleted nodes. It'll be a really slick way to diagnose what's going on. So we're really happy about that. All right, Gary, you want to give them the goods on this one?
Yeah, sure. So in this one, we're looking at live shading groups. So one of the other things that is really quite often requested is the ability for those shading groups, those widgets, those kind of shading gizmos, whatever you want to call them, that you create, to make them assetized, to put them in your asset management system and enable you to do updates based on that. So that's going to be coming in 3.7 as well. So you can start having sections of your network materials sitting in your asset management system and just get updated automatically whenever anyone makes changes.
All right, and so this part here, just wanted to give you guys a heads up that we are working on those sort of floating palettes for lighting in the viewport that give you access to all the various controls. So here, being able to have a sort of stripped back UI where you can get in and start tweaking the controls. So again, we've gone full screen. We don't have a parameters pane anywhere. We can just get down to business. And along the way, we're going to make this even more compact. We hope to make it customizable. Things like that color picker will make that even smaller where we can. Small, but useful. Probably give you guys HSL and temperature tint type controls as well. So you can see it's just a nice way to work with the lighting. And when it comes to also the management of large sets of lights, that's also on our mind as well. So it's not just about a 3-point light rig. It's everything from 2 lights to 2,000 lights that's on our mind. Okay. So another looking at the export of USD preview surface definitions as a part of the Mari export process into Katana. Gary, you want to maybe touch on that sort of larger block of work?
Yeah, so one of those is going to be the ability to have a richer viewer experience, bringing in USD preview surface descriptions, authoring USD preview surface descriptions, and seeing what that all looks like inside Katana, and to give you a much richer and nicer kind of GL-based approximation of what your final rendering is. But also as part of that, we're looking at ways to make the authoring of full-on rich proper renderer USD shade materials, and to be able to export and interface with other parts of your pipeline, and to start that process in Mari and get some of those textures into Katana as quickly and as simply as possible. So it's a really exciting time for us with regards to improving our USD kind of interactions inside Katana.
So here we've got a few just little sneak peeks also of work that the Mari team and Rory, the Mari product manager, is exploring with everybody in terms of getting USD ingested into Mari. We do plan to post to our Foundry GitHub a set of Mari USD plugins later this year. That will require an update to Mari, so keep your eyes posted for Mari 4.6 v4. That will be the first version of Mari that will be able to work with these new plugins when they get posted. But looking at the combination of Mari being able to ingest USD assets, export USD-friendly information, Katana's ability to import it, we're pretty excited about the things that are coming up.